The November 16th meeting of the Rockport School Committee is now in session. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast live. First item of business will be the approval of minutes from 10:20. We were all here for that meeting. Is there any amendment or change anyone would like to offer? Okay, just if I have a motion to approve the minutes of 10:20?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passes unanimously. Public comment, I don't believe we have a public tonight, so that's fine. There's no correspondence at this time. There is one item, or actually two items in the personnel folder, Mark?
Yep, so we have Declan Beaton has resigned from his position as permanent substitute in the high school, so thank you to Declan for his service, and we wish him luck moving on. And happy to appoint Catherine Cook to the position of permanent sub at the high school, taking the position that Declan vacated. So welcome to the district and best of luck.
Great. So Josh, I think you're up now. This is the Student Advisory Committee rep.
Yes, all right. So I have some updates from all three schools. I'll start with the elementary school. The first R Readers program visited the kindergarten and first grade classrooms. They read to the kids and they brought books into the classroom, and a great experience for all of those kids. The elementary orchestra played at the summit, which you'll hear in all three addresses. I'll just say it as one. The orchestra got together, we worked with clinicians, and we put on a performance that culminated in a collective performance of Concerto in D as one combined orchestra from elementary all the way through high school. In the middle school, they've had concerts. The RMS Student Council leadership team met, and they're going to go to the Southern University of New Hampshire for a student leadership conference. The Student Council is organizing a food drive for the Open Door. They have a pretty low absent rate despite the flu and other illnesses circulating, which is pretty successful. And their theater department is working hard for their upcoming performance of Mary Poppins on December 9th, 10th, and 11th. In the high school, same thing with the summit, 16 students were given the John and Abigail Adams Scholarship for their MCAS scores, earning 4 years of tuition at any Massachusetts public state college, including all UMass campuses. Jazz performances will be happening at the Shaylin Liu at 6 p.m. tonight for anyone who... It's a little late now, but and winter sports are kicking off now. I saw they had their first meeting in the auditorium as I was leaving school. So, yep, that's all for me.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Subcommittee updates. I don't believe we have any tonight, so that would... Oh,
Sorry, Kathy and I were wanted to.
There you go.
Kathy and I are scheduling a communications committee update meeting for December 1st. And so we'll let I'll email it to Amanda.
Yeah.
And then we'll have an update
you're
At
dead.
at 6
December 1st at 6 p.m. I guess at the school, it has to be at the school?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
All right.
Okay, so subcommittee
send a
meeting on communications December 1st.
Yep.
And
6
I
p.m.
also want to just mention that the middle school council did meet since our last meeting as
Oh,
well.
great.
It's been a while since we've been here, so I just wanted to put that out there that they did meet. It was a good group and had a good discussion about the superintendent's entry plan. Talked about the professional development of the middle school, with how they were their plan for that for the year, and then we talked about the strengths and the challenges that the middle school is facing and the rest of the work for the year. So it was good to get together.
Great. That's a nice segue into our next item, which is the entry plan update.
So this is the every other week commercial. Entry plan is plugging along. We have closed the survey, so thank you to the respondents. And so that is actually currently being analyzed, and soon if you come into my office, you'll see an 8-foot table with a lot of stuff on it as I start to code and try to figure out the themes of the survey. We've had about 20 one-on-one interviews with stakeholders, including some today. Those will be wrapping up by the end of November, and then the focus groups with faculty, staff, and other stakeholders will be scheduled for December. So right now, on target to complete all of the collection before the holiday break. and then spend January and February really digging into the data, and still on track for March to give a report of entry findings. So stay tuned, and I'll keep giving the same update as we go.
Sounds like you've been getting a pretty good response rate as
Yeah,
well.
fantastic response rate on the survey, and thank you, really big public thank you to everybody who's given up time for the one-on-ones. It's an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and a half sometimes, and people have been really gracious with their time, very thoughtful with their input, and I couldn't have asked for a more authentic way, I think, to collect information. So honestly, it's been an incredible learning experience for me to get to know people personally and to feel everybody's wants and desires for the school district. So it's been very helpful so far.
That's great. Well, we'll look forward to the report being released. Be exciting. School safety program proposals. So at our last meeting, Chief Horvath had shared with us some information, or Superintendent Branco had as well, related to a national program, and I think we had some questions at that meeting relative to how many kids, what streets are they supporting, would they have adult support, and I believe we got a response back from Chief
Yep.
Horvath.
So if you look in your drive, the chief has given you, through me, a draft implementation plan that I think he's done a really nice job kind of trying to answer all those questions for us. He and I will work together upon approval to grab a point person at the police department level, point person at the school department level, and then those two people, along with the chief and I, will sort of put things in motion. So if you haven't had time to take a look at that, that is in there. If you want to scan it, and my hope is we can have a conversation briefly tonight about whether or not this hits all the marks as far as answering your questions, and then hopefully be able to give us your blessing and move forward.
So questions or concerns, I know it, for some of the items we talked about last week, it gives us some very specific streets. It reiterates that the children themselves are not directing traffic or crossing into traffic. They're a sort of belt and suspenders approach to making sure that if someone isn't situationally aware before they're crossing, that they're kind of giving them a secondary heads up that it's not safe to do so. The one part, Mark, I wasn't quite clear on was they identified at least 5 locations and maybe more. Is there an adult with the child at each location, or are the children on their own?
Right now, I think we're going to determine that at an age-appropriate level. So once this is kind of green-lighted at your level, the chief and I will sit down with a school department liaison, a police department liaison, and kind of work those kinks out. So if it's a 16-year-old volunteer, that's way different than if it's an 11-year-old 6th grader, for example. So I think, we're going to be looking for staff partnerships as well. And I just haven't had that full conversation with the chief, but my understanding is we'll make some good age-appropriate decisions. So I can assure you we're not going to be placing young children out there on their own, fully unattended, if it's inappropriate at that age level. Yeah.
Okay, and I think the concern that was behind that question isn't even so much a young child alone on a street directing, but the sort of situational awareness applies to both the children, but also the parents racing to the school in the morning, and you only have to go through one drop-off at school to know all the different ways that parents manage to muddle this up. So particularly it's sort of critical that Jordan's Lane, Summer Street intersection is one I'm pretty familiar with, where people like to glide through the stop signs. And I think the police have really been stepping up sort of an awareness campaign in recent weeks to make sure that people are reminded that stop signs that normally don't have much traffic in the morning need to be observed just as much as when you're there alone. So
We've tried to have an admin presence out front, a heavier police presence. We've put a couple sandwich boards strategically out there now at the corners because we were having trouble with people parking there. Then the buses can't cut the corner. So that's really why we did that, because parked cars were then getting in the way and the buses had to actually wait till that person left, which was slowing down the second runs. So I think if this is sort of an iterative process, we just continue to make adjustments. But let me specifically ask that question, and as we get the answer, I'll send you the answer, and then you can, if you want to just pass that along to the committee, that'd be fine. Does that work?
yeah, no, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Questions or concerns now that we have a little more detail?
I think the detail is great. And I realize also, because it's a new program, it is going to be iterative. So we're not going to have all of our answers at one time, and that's fine. But it seems like everybody has the same goal. So,
Right.
you know, I appreciate that, and I'm not as concerned. I'm not concerned. I was concerned at first because
Right.
I thought it meant
Right.
the crossing guards are leaving, but this is just an addition. I think it's a great addition.
All right, so I think what we may be looking for here is a motion to authorize the superintendent to work with, well, apparently Chief Horvath actually is saying there would be a designee within the school to work with his officer to
Right.
flesh out the program, but essentially to authorize the superintendent to pursue the full plan, which would involve details about, when will the children be trained? What will that training look like? Will there be adults? What time do they have to be there? Are there weather concerns? So,
And we'll definitely come back. So
Yeah.
once we feel like that's more solidified and get it rolling, we'll come back here, either the chief and/or I, and we'll give another quick update.
You
sounds
guys,
good.
are you looking at a fall start, fall 23, or a
I
spring?
actually think in here
January
it
in there.
says,
Yeah.
January. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
right.
And I guess the other question I had was, what if nobody's interested? Or what if only one child is interested?
I feel like that's true about any initiative we take, so I guess I have no good answer for you until we get that
Yeah,
answer.
no, I understood.
Yeah.
Understood.
So the bottom bullet, just to clarify the timeline, says if approved, that we'd work together to put everything together over the next few months, and I think he's actually looking for September 23
Oh,
launch.
okay.
So I think
start
this
the
will-
training in January.
Yeah, so I think we'll take some good time to roll this out. So clearly, we'll have time to come back to you all with more solidified details too.
Okay. That's better.
If that changes, I'll tell you, but I think that's his hope.
All right, so do we have a motion to approve authorizing the superintendent to move forward with this?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Nicole, were you? Yes. Oh, good. Okay. Motion passes unanimously. All right, so now we move to new business, Rockport Elementary School State of this Fall Update.
So let me just switch my screen quickly for everybody here.
Should be fun.
We can turn the reins over. This should work. Doesn't just help. So the hope here, Mr. Chair, is that, we'll have each school come in at least 2 times this year, maybe a third. We'll kind of figure out the schedule, but at least 2 times, and give sort of a state of the union, so to speak, a state of the school. And this is not meant to be a heavy presentation around data and results. Those will come through curriculum updates. This one is really intended to sort of be a commercial, just to let us and the community know how the school year started, how things are going with staff, how things are going with kids, what some of the initiatives being worked on are and why, and how they think it's going so far. So that's sort of the overarching message tonight. So we have Principal Amy Waterman, Assistant Principal Jody Goodhue to entertain us for a few minutes with their update.
I like this setup because it feels like you're testifying before.
I feel like we are.
So we thought we'd start with the big initiatives in the school for this year that's going on. And what we have we wrote a grant through DESE. It's the Lead for Literacy grant. And what that does is that gives us an opportunity to create a team that works together to study our structures, our systems, and our programming in literacy in the elementary school. And we work together with them through April of next year to create an action plan for the school. Our goals or outcomes from that are, the big one is to create a curriculum review to be able to purchase high-quality instructional materials in the area of literacy. That's something that we haven't done, moving towards the science of reading. And we're tying that in with an MTSS system, which we really don't. We have a structure, but it's not really implemented. That's multi-tiered systems of supports, the Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. So that is one of the big things we're doing right now. We have a team of 5. The grant only allowed for stipends. So we work together twice a month outside of school hours, and then we meet with a group from DESE who are our consultants, and they help us work through all of these steps in the whole action plan.
We have a lot of support from our staff because they're recognizing that we need a better, more robust reading program across all grades. The younger grades seem to enjoy what they're doing. and we just need something a little bit more. So this program this committee has been put in place to do a review and to figure out what the next steps are. So we're excited that the staff is on board and supporting us and the others that are part of this committee.
And sticking with literacy, from this summer, Amy and I both knew that writing was going to be an area of concern before we did see the MCAS results. So we already had something in place where we are providing all of our first through fifth grade teachers with landmark training. We've had a trainer come out from Landmark Outreach twice so far. He's done 6 hours. He's going to do 10 more. Every single staff member has the book from Landmark called From Talking to Writing. And what it does is it teaches them to use thematic units to build the writing system around. And it's really a framework for teaching kids how to write sentences and paragraphs in a more methodical way. And it's really great about building the vocabulary of the students and creating better sentences for them. We're hoping this really has a good effect with the fourth grade. Everybody's already implementing lessons in this area. We just had the PD in October.
And where Jody and I worked there together 20 years ago, we're very familiar with it, and I've used it several years in other districts that I've worked in. So we've been already in the classrooms observing teachers putting this in place, giving sample lessons for the teachers to follow and take notes on and be able to ask us questions later on. I was part of a fifth grade class today with a teacher that was implementing it, and the lesson was phenomenal. And I asked her how she felt about it, and she said it's very easy to roll out, and the students are very engaged. And what I saw today was the students' hands were going up, they were up at the board, they were working together, they were working independently. So I feel very confident that this is going to be something that will enhance their writing skills to the level we need them to be at.
And then moving on, the FOSS science, the full option science system, came out of the review that we did with you for science over the past couple years, knowing that we needed something in play. We had grade 2 through 4 pilot this year, so they had professional development over the summer. They will have some ongoing more PD in that area. That is in play in those classrooms. They're all teaching it in fourth grade. One teacher's teaching all of the science. In second and third, they're all teaching science. It's kit-based with consumables, so there's a lot of hands-on lab experiences. They've been doing geology in all the classes, and the kids are like bringing in rocks every day to share what kind of rock they found in their yard. They're really enjoying that. And again, so far that's just 2 through 4. We're still kind of in that pilot phase, assessing what we think about it. If it's great, then we'll put it full blown for the whole school.
And we've been getting good teacher feedback in terms of the amount of lessons, vocabulary. They said the hands-on experiences are awesome, and it's a lot less teacher talk and there's a lot less language to the lessons than other previous ones that they have been using. And I met with a fourth grade student yesterday to get her take on it, and she said it's awesome. She said there's lots of hands-on learning, lots of times to explore throughout the different lessons. She loved they have a notebook that they cut and paste and keep track of all their notes and their labs all in one area. That really seemed to help her. She said there's just the right amount of teacher talk. And I said, what does that mean? She said, well, my teacher doesn't talk that much. It's more the kids. So I really appreciated that. She said it allows for different groups of kids to work together. So she's making new friendships, which I love. She enjoyed the vocabulary, and she just said overall the units were really enjoyable so far.
And then you've heard about math for a really long time now. We did have the grant funding for one more year for both of our products, the iReady Classroom Math and the ST Math. And we have purchased the iReady for the next 6 years following this one. The staff, after a year in the system, they're getting to know it better. They're getting more comfortable with it. They were really surprised at how much the students knew coming in from the year before, having the 1 year back to almost normal with a program like this, which is really discussion-based. So this is something we think is really going to make a difference as well in the long run.
And the feedback we're getting so far has been very good from the teachers, especially knowing that they were very skeptical going into last year with a new, very robust math program. Being in the different roles I was in last year, I heard all the good, the bad, and the ugly. And the teachers, like Jody was saying, the teachers are surprised and happy and pleased with how much the kids retained from last year and how much they're able to carry over into the next grade. So it's working. It's great. All right, going on to the next part, and jump in
Yeah,
anytime.
so, well, coming in here, just, I mean, from our perspective, and we know that not everybody tells us everything anymore, people seem happy. The culture seems really good. Things seem to be going really well with some of the changes that have been implemented this year.
And there's been a lot of staff change, and I mean, look at last year, even just the last few months, I feel the staff collectively have embraced Jody and I in our new roles, and it's been enjoyable, right? It's been a lot of work, but it's been a very collaborative process, and I feel that they've welcomed us into our classrooms. Anytime we walk in, they don't seem nervous. They seem happy that we're there. They stop us in the hallway for questions. They set up meetings to meet with us. So I'm happy with how the process is going so far. Our communication, we have created a staff guidebook this summer, and that's online Google Classroom, so the teachers can go in there anytime and click on what they need, and all the information is in there. It's live, so Jody and I can update it at any time. We update the Google Classroom every week with the weekly buzz that go to parents and families, our staff weekly updates that are sent out on Sunday nights, and the teachers have been coming to us less and less and accessing that more. So that was our goal. So that's been working really well. In terms of scheduling, this year we have implemented a technology class back into the schedule, and we've gotten a lot of great feedback from the students, the parents, and the staff collectively. So Larissa is our tech leader. She was pushing into the classrooms last year, and I think even before then. Now she has the students all coming to her lab, and they're logging in on their own and doing different programs, and she has a set curriculum that she's following. So we're very pleased with that. What else did I want to talk about? Do you want to talk about the half day?
Sure, I'll go. Well, we create inside the master schedule. We created PLCs for our specialists. They were always, left over people who weren't a part of a team. So every specialist is paired up with one other specialist, so they have a PLC every week. And then overall, all 6 of them get to have one PLC together once a week as well. So they are also co-teaching in that model. In each area, there's 2 co-taught classes during the week. In terms of building our half-day schedules and our special schedules when there's community meetings, we have allowed for everybody to have their prep and their recess and their PLC. Nothing is lost in those days anymore. People seem really happy about that as well. And then one of the main things that we felt was really important to switch when we started was we're back to trimesters. So we don't have families not getting any report on how their students progressing until the beginning of February. There'll be a report in December, and one in March, and then one at the end of the year. The staff are thrilled about that as well. Yeah. They're not looking at it as more work. They're looking at it as we needed to get this information out, and they'll have their report cards in their hands when they do conferences instead of conferencing without grades.
And the staff is working with Jody and I in terms of what is on the report card now, because they're recognizing along with us that there are areas that really shouldn't be on there, some that can be combined. So it's a heavy lift right now, and they'll have a little bit of a shorter time to get their grades in, but they seem to be supportive and all on board with that. So we've been doing a lot of great PD work, thanks to Mark and his initiatives, and our staff has embraced it and looking for more, and they are excited that we're not just going to introduce and have one PD day on one topic and move on to something else, that we've been talking about it in PLCs, meetings in the hallway, staff meetings, and some of our curriculum meetings as well. So one of our big PDs is developing an equity mindset, inclusive practices, including IEP process, our TLC classroom, which is therapeutic learning classroom, and the literacy for all, which is scaffolding written language for our elementary students. So these are our 3 big focuses throughout the year, and I think our staff seems to be appreciating them all so far.
They're a little bit skeptical about the amount we're taking on. Is this too much? But when we talk about it, they all fit into the boxes nicely. So they've come around. They loved most of what was going on.
Yeah.
And then we just have a few pictures for you, because it has been a lot of fun too.
We've been able to get into the classrooms some weeks more than others, and sometimes it's to observe a teacher or a particular student, and other times we're just trying to get in to see what's going on, play with the kids, do some puzzles, get to know them. So some of these pictures are from observations in the classroom. Some are morning arrival, which I love because the kids are at that point happy and ready to start their day. And then one of the pictures is also on the bottom of one of our morning or community meetings, which we have once a month. And we have student leaders that lead that with 2 of our staff members, and they're chosen by their teachers. If they've been good leadership skills presenting in class, then they are chosen for that month. So that's been working really well. And our goal is to have all 5th graders have been chosen to be a leader throughout the school year by the end of June.
Nice.
So that's all.
So I'm really glad that throughout your presentation, in addition to sort of the nuts and bolts of what you're doing in terms of the curriculum, you kept going back to the vibe check about what the staff was feeling, because there's so many moving parts for them this year. There's probably some aspect of COVID hangover still in place, but there's so many programs, so many administrative changes that it could be very easy, I would imagine, if you were that staff, to feel overwhelmed or feel lost or feel like you're being overburdened. So it was great to hear that sort of continually refreshed during this presentation.
Yeah, we put out a survey at the beginning of the week so that they could give us some feedback to be able to share with you tonight, telling them we were coming, and Amy had a chance to speak with some of the students as well, so we could have some stuff to share with you.
It's been a good, on several of our feedback forms, it said there's a change in the building. It's a good feeling. You know, I think overall the students and staff feel that it's calm, it's happy, it's an inviting place, and that's really all we could ask for, because they've gone through a lot, the staff,
Yeah.
in the past few years, and the kids too. So to see the all happy staff, kids included, just makes our job easier.
Yeah, what's gone a long way for us so far is just acknowledging that it's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard work. We understand that. Then everybody says, but we need to do it. This is what we need to be doing. So that's been great too.
That's good. That's good. Questions or thoughts?
No, I just wanted to say thank you in particular for, your work in addressing the writing curriculum. It's been something that we've talked about in the committee, we've talked about for years. And so that's great. And I know all thanks to you guys for jumping in and implementing it, and also to the teachers, because I know it's not easy probably to be implementing something new and new lessons partway through the year. So appreciate everybody sort of really getting that rolling. It's great to hear.
I had a question about the professional development and the half-day schedule that you mentioned, and this isn't directly related to anything you were speaking of, but what's the feedback you've had from teachers with that half-day schedule for professional development? Do they like having that as like more often, but as opposed to having like instead of having like a full day
I think
professional
they'd like
development?
to have more if they could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of more half days, or would it be better to have like
more any halves or fulls?
Or full,
I think
yeah.
they appreciate the half because they are not losing something in their lesson planning over the course of
Right.
the week, and still get to do the PD in the afternoon as well.
yeah,
And a full day PD is
A
a
lot.
lot.
it's a lot, yeah.
And so I think from a staff perspective, they're trying to hold on to every word that's being said and learn and taught and take notes and absorb it. But a full day of listening and engaging is a lot.
Right.
So I think if I were to speak on their behalf, I'm sure they would, I know they want more PD, but I think they'd probably rather have more half days than full
Right.
days.
Yeah, and one thing we didn't mention is we're starting PD in restorative practices. We hadn't put this in here because it wasn't something we've done with our staff yet, but Amy and I and Amy Rose went out to a PD through ECLC for this, and then Mark brought someone in just yesterday that we worked with to start doing it on our own from a leadership. Middle and high school has had a chance to address it with staff, but we haven't yet. So that's coming up first week of December.
Yep.
Great.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I think what's important to point out a couple things. Number one, I concur around the vibe in the school. I think, now that our office is in there, when I walk around the hallways, you see people happy, you see people welcoming. We started the year talking about a sense of belonging and inclusivity. And if that doesn't happen, then all of the hard work of academics and instructional practices doesn't happen as well. So, number one, I applaud the leadership team for kind of embracing that concept of belonging and inclusivity and paying that forward to the staff. It also can't be lost on us that when you have multiple curriculum initiatives, FOSS, iReady, and literacy, granted in different years, but back to back to back, in almost all cases except for fourth grade, you're talking about one teacher teaching 4 subject areas. So when we do that at the middle school and we do a math initiative, I only teach math. So I'm not saying it's harder or easier in either example, but you are taking on multiple curricular areas to try to be the best expert you can, all within a condensed amount of time. And I think it's one of the things that makes elementary school a very difficult role to fill. So I applaud the staff for recognizing that while that's daunting to have 2 or 3 going at the same time, we have to do it because every year we don't do it, that's a year that we miss with that particular group of kids. So thank you for that work. Thank you to the staff. I think it's hard work, but the elementary school feels like it's humming, and we talked during the MCAS presentation about outcomes and our hope for a discussion around outcomes next year. I think there will be fruits of our labor here a year later. I really feel like we're going to see it. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. So that would move us to our discussion about the Mass Association of School Committees and Mass Association of School Superintendents joint meeting that occurred 2 weeks ago? I think it was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I think for the, so it's sort of an open discussion to share whatever it is we wanted to about the conference.
Yep.
Maybe we'll have Mark go after the school committee, because I think, it's an incredibly important aspect of a superintendent's professional development to be able to share. But for the school committee, one of the things that I thought was really impressive this year is we've often in our annual reviews cited the fact that we haven't done any professional development year after year because we didn't have the opportunity to. And this year, 3 of our 5 members were able to optimize one ticket to go on different days, or in some cases on the same day, to take advantage of this. And I think in some ways, and thinking back on it, it was an offshoot of when we had Mass come in and share with us best practices about hiring a new superintendent. It kind of refreshed us in the sense that we are, a small and tight and cohesive school committee, but we have all sorts of other variations on that theme throughout Massachusetts, and we could often benefit from exposure to them. And I think for me, just starting off the discussion, that was the important part. If you've ever been to any professional development conference, usually there's a lot of chaff, but if you're patient, there are also real nuggets that you can get out of every session. And I think we did a nice job fanning out to try and optimize as much information gathering and knowledge building as we could. I'll just keep rolling because then we can have an open discussion. So for me, I went to 3 sessions. One of them, Mark was in. It was the first one on the first day that we both attended, and it had to do with the unique challenges of a regional school district. And I want to be careful about, well, why were you attending that? It's because often we have a lot of assumptions about what other school districts are going through. So for me personally, I wanted to take a look at what is it that you've assumed but you don't know about that sort of scenario. As a kid myself, I went to a regional school district with 3 towns pouring into it. It's a very different scenario, I know, from a small town having a single school district. And what they were really going over were some of the challenges in terms of the logistics of how they manage the relationship with the other towns, and the sort of overarching structure of basically you have to come to consensus on everything. And if you don't, there are default state guidance on how you will do it if you get into loggerheads with another community. So it made me very grateful for being in a small community, because the overwhelming message you kept getting was, the more school districts you have as a part of your region, the less control you're going to have and the less flexibility without massive collaboration. So, Mark, I don't know if that was something you took away
Yeah,
from
that was
it, but-
definitely one of my takeaways. It was very much like nuts and bolts type, not big picture. A lot to do with, as you mentioned, budgeting and the relationships that the school committee and the school forms between the different communities, as you mentioned,
Right.
for sure. One of my big takeaways from it was, even though it is definitely more of a maybe a harder challenge because there's more involved as opposed to being a single school district, there's a lot of support out there from MARS, the Mass Association of Regional Schools,
Right.
and then also with DESE. So one of the panelists was from DESE, I believe a finance director or something, and it was very clear that they're there to support those schools who are part of regional
Right.
school, and it's nice to know that that there's experts out there that are able to
Navigate that sort of-
facilitate those things. Yeah, that was my big takeaway.
And definitely for anyone watching this meeting, this isn't foreshadowing. This is about more information is better. And June, you'd love to know that there's so much complexity in terms of how the finances are handled, in terms of the timeframes that are involved. And we got a recommendation from that state person that, we should probably have a multi-million-dollar rainy day fund, and this is how we build one. It's like, really? That's fascinating. So if you could get right on that, that would be great.
Yeah. I learned more about revolving accounts and deficiency accounts and XX accounts than I knew
Yeah.
before. That is for sure. Yeah.
But it does give you a feel for sort of the mechanical aspect of what school districts are wrestling with across the state. And even though they're larger in terms of some of their funding challenges, even in a regional district, it's still a difficult enterprise to support. The second session I went to is very entertaining in a way. It's what's new in teacher union contract negotiations. And the premise was supposed to be introducing interest-based bargaining, which I think to a large degree we've been able to institute in our own negotiations. And we've really streamlined them over the last 10 years. But what was fascinating about this discussion was it involved a representative from the Boston school district. So the individual there represented about 9,500 teachers. And then there was a lawyer who was the other component of this who would negotiate with that union negotiator. And as they were describing their working relationship, it suddenly went south with conversations that said things like, well, once you lose the trust of the teachers, it's very hard to get it back. It's a multi-year endeavor. And on the other side, well, maybe you could help by telling those teachers how trustworthy we are. So really what it was an illustration of was how quickly things can fall apart when you're not collaborating closely. And what I took away from this, because again, I think we've made a lot of progress towards interest-based negotiation, but what it really illustrated for me was how far we've come in the last 10 years in terms of a relationship that's really solid and collaborative. And it's not necessarily that we're on the same page all the time with our unions, but there's clear evidence that we're trying to come to a resolution that allows us to treat our employees equitably within the confines of our budget. So that was reassuring to me, and also, I thought it was really important to hear from the union rep that she wanted the people in that room to take away, particularly if they were from school committees, that although she's the union rep, they're not one monolithic unibrain, that they have 9,500 people with 9,500 different opinions. And even if she felt like there was a proposal that was within the best interest of that community, it really came down to what the vote was on the floor. So again, clear communication was a huge plus in trying to sell any proposal in a contractual negotiation. So that was worth it to see, just in terms of sheer scale, because they also had a representative from Leominster who had a very successful relationship with his negotiating partners, and part of what he really emphasized was that the relationship doesn't start on day one of the negotiation. It's 365 days a year, trying to make sure that you're connected with the people you work with. And, I think that was, it's great advice, but in terms of actually executing on that, it takes conscious effort. And I think we're in a pretty good spot in that sense. I think we've got a pretty good relationship with the unions that we negotiate with, or the bargaining units that we negotiate with. And then the last one was the risk of these conferences, which I think one presenter mentioned, was that particularly with school committee representatives, they come to this conference, they get all charged up with all sorts of ideas, and they go stampeding back to their school districts and inflict them on the permanent staff without any regard to whether it's in their bailiwick or not. Fair enough. But the last one I went to was school committee role in financial oversight. And what it really, they went through the mechanics of, when you should be getting reports, what they should consist of. And what it really illustrated for me, or started me thinking about, was in terms of coordinating the information we get as a school committee, that's varied over the years based on administration and presenter. It may not be necessarily this nicely synchronized reporting that leads into what we present for a budget to the community when we're looking for, the monies for the following school year. And that's something that can be a work in process, and I've shared with Superintendent Branco some ideas on that, with the goal really being the budget is very difficult for the public to understand because it has so many moving parts, some of which don't occur in the year that you're talking about. Some of them are in arrears. And it can even be confusing for the school committee to keep the separate pieces clear when we're looking at regular reporting. So I'd share some thoughts with Mark, and it'll probably be a work in progress, but really coordinating with, June's got all the information there, but how we communicate that out and how that synchronizes with various budget workshops and presentations to FinCom and school. It seems like there's an opportunity there to match that to the categories we're always describing on the floor of town meeting about where the inflows and outflows go. So that was valuable, not so much in the content they were giving, but in sort of sparking the idea that part of professional development, even for school committees, is to refresh and reinvent and take a look at how could we be doing this better, because a big part of our role is communicating out to the public. So with that was my experience. I don't know, Mark or Nicole, if you'd like to share some of the things you saw.
I had a question about the oversight one that you went to. Who were the presenters on that? Were they from different schools, or were they from DESE or from Mask? Or who were they from?
All of the above.
Yeah.
So, and what they really tried to present was, regardless of scale, it's the presentation of the information really impacts how well you can process what you're getting. In some cases, some school committees don't know what to ask for, so they were refreshing you on that point. And in some cases, they wanted to illustrate you're asking too much, or you're asking at the wrong level of granularity. Like the one that came out of Worcester, which has a $500 million budget, which blew my mind. They asked us, how many cost centers did we think they had? The answer was 30. So a much smaller number than the crowd was anticipating. Actually, the way they expressed it was, how many line items do you think we had? And they said 30, and people in the crowd gasped and said, that can't really be true. And then they backed up a little and said, well, okay, it's more like cost centers, but half of those are related to oddball. But what it really illustrated was a lot of school committees go into the weeds and get lost in the individual accounts, whereas that's something that the superintendent is empowered to monitor, but how we then provide oversight on what the superintendent is doing, that was really the basis. So it did have members from DESE, it did have large school committees from large districts to help, and it had some people who've been doing this for years, so that if you were a newly elected school committee person who didn't know how to get your arms around this because it's confusing, you'd have half a chance.
I wonder if MASC does any additional training or workshops on that. They must, because that would be something.
Yeah.
That would be something that would be nice, I think, as a school committee to have sort of a refresher, every year or every other year, sort of thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, one of the ideas that one of them had, or one of the best practices that he shared, was they often recommend a Q1, 2, 3, and 4 approach, but with a clear definition of Q1, not in the Q1 in the school year. Not a lot has happened, so you'll look cash flush, and it needs to be appended with in Q1. Always remember that the following things haven't occurred, and by Q3, kind of the die is set. And they may often be talking about what do we hold back on. So part of their point was, don't ask for weekly or monthly updates, because that may just not give you the information you're looking for, but make sure you format it in a way that you always have the same expectation for what Q1 has and doesn't have, because it's clearly and simply indicated. So that to me seemed pretty powerful, and it also would feel like we're putting less of a burden on June if we're looking for the same thing in the same format each time, each year. But getting there is going to require a little bit of process, definition, and struggle. But so that was exciting. I mean, in terms of generating the idea of there is a better way to do this that is also explicable to the public when we get to budget season. And for us, it just means that we're looking at the same categories, reinforcing quarter after quarter, so it's very clear for us where we're going and if we're drifting or if we're doing well. So we'll definitely look into whether MASC has sort of a refresher.
Yeah, I think that would be nice. Good, thank you. You want me to go? All right, thanks. So in addition to the one I attended with you, Michael, on the challenges of the regional schools, I went to a session from the MASC Consortium for Innovative Education Assessment. I was really looking forward to this session. It was really a lot of great information. The teacher in me was very much looking forward to this one. It was presented, there was a project leader from the consortium, and there were an assistant superintendent, teachers, and school committees from various districts. It's a 8-district consortium. They have a public task bank of performance assessments, along with a data dashboard where they have metrics for school quality measures. And the idea is that they're tying together the assessment piece along with social, emotional, and school culture all together into one to get a real true picture of the student. And this came about because these districts were tired of MCAS data being the lens through what they were always being graded on. Because we know there's more than just the MCAS data, right? But that's that piece that's always put out there. So they created a portrait of a graduate with all these different components to a portrait of a graduate, what they were looking for. So all these performance tasks are assessing these skills of portrait of a graduate. And then along with the performance assessments, and their goal is for every student to have 2 performance assessment per content area each year. So 8 performance assessments per year, all the way up through the different grade levels. And with that, they're doing surveys of the students and teachers to gather these school quality measures, and they're making that available to administrators and teachers so you can see really this big picture, this whole picture of the whole child. So it was really, I think, a fascinating idea. The consortium is looking to expand, but they don't quite know how to do that right now because of the way they're structured. So it's something that they're actively looking into that and figuring that out right now. But I've looked through some of the assessments, and they're good assessments, but I think it's that piece with the dashboard and the school quality measures that ties it all together. Because a lot of people have performance assessments, but combining it together for the social emotional learning and the school culture, as even just Jody and Amy were mentioning, I think is really, really a neat idea. So that was a really great session to attend.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So are they using assessments that the school already uses, or are these over and above? Would you replace, did they replace assessments that maybe a school already used in content areas, or are these an extra assessment?
No, I think it's more the performance assessments teachers would use them would be replacing other assessments they might have for certain standards that they're assessing. Yeah. And most of the assessments that I looked at were not, were 1 or 2 day type of performance assessment. They're not so long that you wouldn't be able to manage them. There's 120 assessments that they have public, and they're all vetted. They go through different validation protocols, and they all, meet certain criteria of being equitable for all students. They all have different access points for all students. They're very well. Yeah, it was really good. Yeah. The third session I attended was on communication. I didn't know exactly what the session was going to be in regards to, but I know that's a focus. The session was about using videos from the school to home to increase engagement. So if superintendent sends out an email, you only get a certain number of people viewing or actually reading through that entire email. Same thing with the newsletters. So the idea with the videos, school sends out the videos, there's more, they call clicks, more watches on it from families and the students both. It was presented with a superintendent, and then there was a media consultant who does the videos. This person happened to be a parent of somebody in the school district, so it was kind of an interesting partnership that they had. And they're actually licensing some of these videos for school districts to use and to modify to make them very unique to that one particular school district. But what I took away from that is if maybe there's a way to have students engage with these videos and produce these videos. And these videos then could go out they use it for topics that are very open or an objective, and that you could use, basically they're trying to create a video library, they called it. So that each year you have things, you mentioned earlier, the sense of inclusion with students. So that was one of the videos they actually did, a sense of belonging. So every year they start the year with that video for students. So it was a really neat idea and something to think about. I know maybe a media center type of place could take that on for sure. So yeah, it was really good. It was thank you for arranging. I was glad to go to those sessions.
Thank you. I went to 2 different sessions. We had, I don't know if the day you went, you sort of had that large group meeting. The day that I went, it was the whole large group with the diversity, equity, and inclusion panel and a really great speaker. And that was a great opportunity. The panel had educators on, administrators, educators, parents, students, and it was talking about diversity, equity, inclusion in schools and how it impacted all of those different people, but also that diversity, equity, and inclusion does not just mean race. It can mean lots of different things. For students, how students access education, it can be gender, it can be income level, it can be housed or unhoused students. So it was a great opportunity to hear from all those different people, and it sort of reinforced the professional development that Mark's brought to the staff this year, and how important that is, and just how important statewide, and sort of the rising tide lifts all boats model. that that's something that we need to all be discussing, and it's a sort of a statewide focus as well. So I went to, and Mark went to this this session too. It had a very dire title, "Communities Divided."
Oh my.
However, it was actually really great. It was with a communications consultant, a specialist who I think has worked with the Boston Public Schools, maybe the city of Boston in general, with DESE, with MASC. And it was really sort of about communication in general and sort of this new age of communication where we're dealing with so much information across all of these different platforms. You're dealing with social media. You're dealing with Zoom meetings. You're dealing with sort of all of these different things. I took pages of notes, which I will not inflict upon everybody. But it was really, for one thing, I was grateful because I think that a lot of the discussion in the room was, what if my fellow school committee member does X, Y, Z in the middle of a meeting? So I was grateful that even if we don't always all agree on topics, that in Rockport we're able to model, that was the message, like the children are watching. So we're able to sort of model that respect. And I think that generally people that come to speak to the school committee model sort of a respectful conversation. So I thought I was grateful for that. It talked about some recent court rulings around public comment, which were interesting in Natick specifically, and just sort of tightening up your rules around public comment and making sure that it's very clear. Making sure that that's very clear, talking about social media. Spoiler alert, do not engage. However, just because of the inequity of that, you could be addressing constituents unequally. So you respond to one person, you don't respond to another person, and then it's, you're not addressing them equally. But also the power of social media to sort of tell your district's story, to talk about what are the Rockport Public Schools, what are we doing, and to sort of have steering the narrative and the story of your district. So it wasn't sort of a, social media is evil. It was just talking about, the ways to use it appropriately. And then other ways, it was talking about other ways to sort of engage the community, a lot of which Mark has started doing, focus groups, and we've done in the past, sort of focus groups, surveys, polls, coffee hours, which we've talked about, and just being out and about in the community, like being at different events, which I think we kind of, all of us have or have had kids in the schools, and so we're kind of out and about naturally in the community and talking to people and seeing what's going on out in the community. So that was is what we need sashes. And then one takeaway that I really liked, it was talking about, sort of like addressing these different issues with each other, with the community, with families, with staff. And they were talking about bringing back your focus to your core values and your mission statement, and really looking at what those are for your district, where it's written, what it is, thinking about that, and always bringing sort of the focus back to that when you're having a discussion. I thought that was actually, it seems very simple, but I think that it was very helpful. And that was someone, I think, from a district where they've been having a lot more sort of difficulties in discussions and having, debates between, that got kind of nasty. Among school committee members, with families, and so I thought that was something that I would want to remember. The second one that I went to is actually a meeting of our division. We belong to Division 1.
Ooh, we're Division 1.
And you represented us at the meeting.
I represented us at the Division 1 meeting. It's sort of all of the northeastern corner area of the state. It's a fairly big division. It was really nice to sort of go and hear. They've kind of they scaled back for COVID, so there haven't really been division meetings. There is a Division 1 Facebook page, I found out. they're going to start having more in-person and Zoom meetings. I think they're going to try to do things once a month. So I think it would be worthwhile for us to try and send a representative or two to those meetings, because it was just nice to sort of talk with other school committee members and not feel isolated, hear what different people are doing. And they took sort of ideas from everybody about different topics they'd like to have presentations on. One of them was definitely budget. A lot of people were saying they wanted more information, more presentations on the budget. But it was just good to sort of hear about that structure. They were talking, Dorothy Presser, I think her name is. She's the one that, she did charting the course for me. I don't know if she was everybody's. She used to be on the Linfield School Committee, I think, for years. And she came and introduced herself and talked about how she's a resource. We should put her phone number in our phones if we have questions. Just sort of reminding us that there is support, there's people there to answer questions if we have them. And also, did not know this, you can go to Charting the Course as many times as you want. They have frequent flyers who go every year. Colleen's been twice. They have people that have been 15 times. They go every year. And another thing that I thought was kind of nice is they had said that a lot of districts, when a new member goes to Charting the Course, they send a veteran member with them. And I think that's really nice. And we won't be, there's a technical school, they send the entire school committee every time to Charting the Course with a new member, but maybe we won't go that far. But I think that's I thought that was a good idea. And I was also thinking, once you've been on the school committee for a while, going back to Charting the Course is not a bad idea, because it makes more sense once you've actually been doing the job. A lot of it, you can dive deeper into it at the time. So it was really worthwhile. Thank you, Mark, for presenting the opportunity to us. And I'm not sure why it's all the way on Cape Cod and not like in Worcester or Fitchburg or somewhere in the middle of the state. But it was worth doing, and I hope to be able to do it again. It was great.
That would bring us to your
Sure.
observations.
So, first of all, I just thank the committee members for going that went. I think there's something refreshing and healthy about kind of doing that shared learning piece and going, collectively. So I appreciate having people there. I'll work backwards a little bit. It was Chris Horan was the gentleman who ran that Communities Divided. And you're right, it was kind of a menacing topic, but I found that one really interesting, particularly as Monty and Mike and the rest of the leadership team and I start to work on our communication strategies and what our front-facing profile is for the community. I think we walked out of there with a lot of really nice ideas, and there were fascinatingly various opinions on using social media. Some where they just use it as one-way communication, and I don't mean communicating with a school committee member, but I mean the school district's Facebook pages or Twitter accounts or Instagrams. Some were adamant on not having comments open. Some have comments open. The consultant said if you don't open comments, it's basically a website. So it was really interesting to hear him as a professional communicator say, well, that's the word social in social media, yet we are very afraid of that for a lot of legitimate reasons, I would say. So those are big conversations that the committee and I will have, that the leadership team and I will have moving forward as we kind of craft our communications plan moving forward. The best quote, this is not really academic, but the best quote from that particular session when they talked about school committee members not engaging was, "Don't mud wrestle with a pig. While both of you will get dirty, only one of you will like it." I had never heard that before, so I clearly took notes. So not the most academic quote I've ever delivered on television, but that was one of my interesting takeaways. Went to a great session called Building a Sustainable Leadership Model for Culturally Responsive Schools. Ties right into this work that we're doing around culturally proficient classrooms and environments. And one of the really nice things in there that my takeaway was there was a book I hadn't read, Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain by Zaretta Hammond, that I've already ordered and is coming in tomorrow. When you talk about social emotional learning, cultural responsiveness, sense of belonging, inclusivity, that's a lot of sociology. it feels very ethereal and not grounded to some extent by some people. So this particular author has actually connected it to brain science and to learning. So as we move the professional development forward in the district, I'd like to use that book and others that author recommends to kind of ground our work, so that the people internally and externally who wonder why we're putting so much emphasis on this can have a pretty clear understanding on the positive outcomes for academia when you do this kind of work. So that already adding that to my short read list. Another great one called A Systems Approach to Equity. The Framingham Public School District had their entire leadership team there, principal, central office, superintendent, talking about how they've done a lot of this equity work, and similarly they used comments like context matters. How do you define diversity and equity in your community, because it's not a cookie cutter, every community is different. And that's the work we did early in the year as faculty and staff, is trying to define that for Rockport. And for the Rockport Public Schools. And something that June and I just scratched the surface on, my big takeaway in that one was equity-based classroom budgeting, and having a purposeful rationale for why a particular amount of dollars are assigned to a school, particularly in your classroom supplies and materials lists. So we started that conversation, and we'll continue that and maybe bring some of that practice into this year's budget. So really, really good opportunities to learn. And a couple of my big takeaways, one was to help us move the equity work, or really any work we're doing in this district forward, is to continue to engage in collaborative leadership and distributive leadership, and do steering committees and support teams at the faculty level. So now that the leadership team has kicked off some of this work for the first couple months, can we engage small representative committees across the faculty and staff to say, now you're going to take this ball and help us run with this, and embed it into classroom practices, into PLCs, into staff meetings, and really sort of have our collective learning move forward. It can't just be done by principals. Clearly, it can't just be done by me. We need a full buy-in on whatever our initiative is. But that particular session talked a lot about paying it forward and moving the work forward. So I enjoy the conference. I don't know why it's on the Cape. The summer superintendent's one on the Cape makes sense because it's in the summer. So I don't pick the location. So thank you for going. I had a good time.
Did our student representative, I think, also attended?
You did go, right?
I did,
we didn't.
in fact,
Yeah, we didn't
yeah.
cross paths. But if you want to mention that, go ahead.
Yeah, we talked a lot about leadership and how to work collaboratively with students to best represent their interests and their needs at school committee. And we also talked a lot about networking outside with other school committees. We talked about, Master does a lot of work at lobbying at the state level. So working with Master in different capacities. Different types of presentations you can give at school committee meetings, best ways to do outreach, best ways to work with administration on policy that affects students most directly. So overall, it was a great experience. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is great that you went, Josh. That's awesome. Security and safety training update.
So it's a total shift in topic, quite honestly, but I have no good segue. So we've actually spent a lot of time on safety and security and emergency preparedness, and I just wanted the committee to understand, clearly we take this seriously, you take it seriously, but I want you to know the nuts and bolts of the work that we're doing behind the scenes. So on our full professional development day, on top of having a consultant come in and keep doing our equity work. We had, I think, about a 2-hour session that Chief Horvath put together with his officers and with Martha Wright, and they really built a really nice 2-hour day, and it was all teachers and paraprofessionals for that 2-hour session, and it was all on our Alice training around aggressive intruder and active shooter training. So really good. It was important. We haven't done it in a little while because of COVID. We've had some faculty turnover and so obviously some leadership turnover. So it was a really good opportunity to really refresh our practices in the district. So I'd like to thank Martha and the chief and the police department for putting that together. They did a nice lift on that. And while it's not work that those of us who are in charge of taking care of the lives of children necessarily enjoy doing, or in some instances it's almost a stressor sometimes to do it, it's super important. So I just want you and the community to know that we take it seriously. It went well, and the chief and I are going to try to work on ways to get this type of training out to the particular staff members who work in the building but couldn't be present that day for lots of reasons. So cafeteria staff, custodians, people who will be in the building in the event that something happens. So we're going to make sure we can extend that training out a little bit.
I was just going to add one to that. Any permanent subs or
Right.
even daily subs,
Right.
because I know that's oftentimes a group that is
Yep.
forgotten with those Alice trainings, but they're in the classroom with those students, and the students look to them. So for them to understand those protocols, too, I think is important.
Thank you. And then we had a district team, central office and school-based teams go through the CSTAG training, the Comprehensive School Threat Assessment Guidelines. This was really comprehensive training. Active shooter or aggressive intruder is in the moment. Threat assessment is we think something could happen, right? So these things are not the same. They're often interchanged by accident. So we have a district-wide representative team, including many of us from central office, building leadership, and then counseling team, therapeutic team members, and teachers, who went through a 6-hour, right, a 6-hour online training for level 1, and then what you see on the screen is level 2, which was a real-time Zoom training that we went with the program. Again, Chief Horvath, big thank you. He put this together. Rockport actually hosted it, even though it was virtual. He did the lift and the work, again, with Martha, to coordinate our section of this. And I think there had to be 15 or 16 communities involved, police departments, school departments, municipalities, who are all going through this training to get themselves to level 2 training, so to speak. So now we have all staff members, trained up on Alice. We have a really decent group of people cross-sectioned across the district, ready for our comprehensive school threat assessment. And that is something that we do more often than I think people will ever know. It could be something as simple as a student having a bad day that comes out the wrong way, that turns into a light level or low level threat assessment, all the way up. So thank you to the people who were voluntold to participate in that kind of a program. It's a heavy lift, and it is an added responsibility. So I appreciate it, and I just want the community and you all to know the importance behind the work. And it does dovetail to a lot of the other work we've done. Central office has a new entry with the double 4-year. Monty and the tech team and Kirk and the maintenance team have been fantastic, helping us with doors, buzzer systems. Monty and I keep talking about grants or what other monies are out there for key card systems, for badge systems, so that we can really upgrade our security. We're a small district with 2 buildings, and I get that we all seem to know each other, but there are some spots where we need to tighten up a little bit. So we'll continue to work with the right people and come back to you as we make those changes. So any comments, questions here?
The CSTAG, I love that that's been folded in as well as the Alice.
It was my first experience. I've actually never done it, so it was a really, really high quality training. Yeah.
Colleen,
I have a question. Actually, it connects with something you did, Mark, in the training that you were just at, where they are working on those assessments that are social emotional as well as academic. And, we had talked in the past about how, better to not have a threat by detecting it early. And some of that is that whole child knowledge for everyone to have and for that to go through the schools with the child. And I didn't know if this speaks to that at all, or if that kind of assessment was speaking to that at all, or that would just be a collateral benefit but not a purpose.
Yeah, it wasn't explicitly stated, but I think you're right. We all know that when students are engaged and they have a sense of belonging, that these things are not as prevalent, those threats.
And I think there would be a value added to the data that comes out of some of that kind of information. We often do the risk assessments and some of that other work. And so I think when you do that work, for lack of a better term, you see the red flags a lot earlier. And then this team, there are different levels of response, right, and recognition of the assessments. And so you always want to be at the lowest level.
It's a neat connection, you noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
So I have a question, and this is something we talked about in SAC. It feels like Alice isn't covered enough among the student body. Like, we go through a training once a year and then it kind of falls out of fashion, and you know, like, it'll come back every time there's an incident that occurs and students, you know, get riled up about it, and then we'll look into it. But it feels like it could, and I understand it's a very stressful event for some students, and it's also a stressful event for staff as well. But I feel like it could be like not even like a full drill, but there, like, if we could look into a way to incorporate it more frequently into the school year, more, you know, like going over it kind of like more frequently, like a fire drill almost, because it really hinges on a lot, like mainly the students knowing what to do in that situation. And a lot of times, you know, in that stressful situation, if you've only covered it once, you know, for the past 2 years, you're not going to remember that. So I think it's important that we.
So I'm actually glad you brought it up. So when we came out of the takeaways and next steps from the October 11th training were what are our next steps, and that was the general consensus across the board, including with the chief, was, you know, and I can't speak to Rockport historically because I really don't have any, but my anecdotal understanding is, you know, it ebbed and flowed a little bit. COVID hit, and a lot of other things got in the way of doing these kind of things, including regular fire drills and bus evacuations, something as low-hanging fruit as that, right? So those are conversations we're having, bus evacuations, fire drills, and you're right, we're going to do 2 levels. One, we're going to find a way to train students up again, whether that happens through certain classrooms or through certain assemblies. And then after we feel confident about that, we're going to roll into, similar, as you said, like a fire drill model. The professionals recommend, unlike fire drills, they recommend, and I think you and I talked about this, you have to be careful with how much of this you share publicly. You know, some people want you to give people heads ups because of the possible reaction to it. Professionals don't love the heads ups because then you don't see real reactions. We're charged with taking care of the social, emotional, and physical safety, so that's a conundrum sometimes. So we're kind of in a you have to go slow to go fast model when it comes to Alice. But once we get back on the bike and we're doing this regularly, it will absolutely be embedded in the work. But it's funny to equate it to bus evacs, but those are the conversations we've had. Bus evacuations, fire drills, safety drills. Every district is sort of getting back to pre-COVID norms when it comes to this stuff. Yeah, thank you.
That's a good point. Restorative practices.
So the opposite end of this, so you heard the elementary school talk about this a little bit. A lot of moving parts to this work, so I'll back up a little bit that we had good conversations in our summer retreats when we started talking about equity and belonging. We also talked about student discipline in those same conversations, and we talked about rate of suspensions and detentions, and we talked about the punitive nature that some schools have, including Rockport schools, when it comes to managing student behaviors. And so that, out of that work in the summer with the leadership team at our retreat, came conversations about this concept, which is a social science concept of restorative practices and restorative justice. And this theory is that there is very little scientific data out there that speaks to detentions, suspensions, in-school suspensions, or the American prison system for that matter, actually changing long-term behaviors in human beings. So with that said, that we feel as an administrative team that we really need to have some new methods to help students understand their reactions might have been inappropriate, help us and them understand why those reactions occurred, how they can learn from them, make up for them, repair, and then move on with their life to whatever extent they need to. So that's a heavy lift. Interestingly, then we all started talking about this in pockets, and then we came back together again in our district leadership team meetings, and Mr. Rodman, our middle school principal, had this connection with George Conant, who he had worked with previously in Maine as an administrator and a teacher many years ago, and he runs a company called Restorative Practices of Maine. So I met with George and Jeff a while back to get a feel for his program. He's a longtime veteran of the Maine public school districts up there, an old-time, fascinating story, old-time farmer. His family owns a dairy farm, one of the largest dairy farms in the country, apparently. One of 9 children who just slipped out of farming into education. And his wife is a Gloucester native. And so what happened was, after his 44-year career or something up in Maine, she said, well, I got stuck for 44 years up in Maine, now I'm bringing you to Gloucester. So he's more than happy to have like a 7-minute commute to work with the local school district. So he came in, 2 days ago? And we did an out with just the leadership team, principals, assistant principals, deans, myself, and Martha. And he did an hour-and-a-half primer, so to speak, on the concept of restorative practices and restorative justice. And then the timing just happened to be perfect that the middle school and the high school had a staff meeting with a PD embedded in it. So they built, those two schools built, that's why the two here were jealous about that. So they built their high school and middle school staff meeting PD around this topic to start talking about our disciplinary problems, to start talking about student behaviors, to start talking about the uptick across the Commonwealth in suspensions and detentions, and how we can change our culture within our school district to be addressing student behaviors differently and not just punitively. Also, at the exact same time, on November 9th, a new state law came out related to 37H and 37H and a half, telling us that we actually cannot, with very few exceptions that we don't need to get into now, but with very few exceptions, we cannot suspend a child until we have demonstrated and documented attempts to restorative practices. So the state, through law, has now recognized that what we're doing is not necessarily changing behaviors with children in the long term and making them better human beings along the way. So it's not just about throwing a kid out of class anymore, sending them to the dean's office, giving them a detention or a Saturday detention and moving on. So this is going to be a lot of work. George is going to come in and work with us as he has done. Then he's going to go out to the schools and he's going to lead job embedded PD in all 3 buildings and really try to kind of help embrace this work. And get some legitimate practices. So that I suspect it's going to take the entire school year before we really feel the impact of this work. But if you tie this work together with the equity work, and then you listen to the fact that we're not ignoring academia when you hear what the elementary school is talking about tonight, I feel really good about the amount of work we're doing. And it does sound like a lot of work. And I need to recognize that from my seat. The principals then need to recognize that so that we don't have people burning out, good professionals just saying, wow, this is a lot. So in any chance we can get, we're trying to connect the dots. You know, A plus B plus C gets us there. So all of this work, while it feels like separate stuff, it all falls under 1 or 2 major umbrellas of work. So any thoughts or questions about this work?
It would be interesting to hear at some point how this actually is implemented in practice, because I think, we have our own perceptions of what is it that's happening when someone is losing it in the classroom, but they may be not very accurate in terms of what teachers are actually dealing with or how overwhelming a scenario it may be for them.
Yeah, so I think this is another, I feel like this year or next year, I'm going to be giving a lot of like second and third updates on some of the work, right? So you're just going to
Totally.
hold me accountable for making sure I come back on certain topics, that's all.
Yeah.
And I think on top of that, sort of like how are our current supports and structures and systems in place, either supportive of this or not supportive of this, and how it sort of trickles down and other things that, what other change comes from this or what other change needs to come from this.
So glad you said that. So it's part of the budget process and part of the staff process. You'll hear a little bit about that when we get to the budget conversation. But yeah, you need the right personnel. I don't mean the right people. You need the right jobs and the right job descriptions and the right infrastructure to do some of this work. So we're having conversations about that, what that could look like and how we can make some changes or what we need to do to address this work. So yeah, in the classroom and in the office of each school.
I also think at some point it would be great to find a way to include families in sort of what we're doing and why we're doing it and what that looks like sort of across the community.
So
at
George,
school.
the hope there is George is going to help us do that work. He's done this so often that I feel like I want to make sure we learn from and with him. And then he kind of talks to us about, maybe it's embedded in that communications work. So something comes out from the principal, something comes out from me through the s'mores, through different venues, maybe a new tab on the page, multiple spots where we can explain. Because this isn't language that, I'm old at 50-something years old. Most of us just grew up in the world of punitive schools. you know, and that's just the way the schools ran, and it was good enough for me, it's good enough for my kid, or, you know, your expectation when the school calls, if you have a kid who stepped out of line, is, how many days is he suspended for? You don't even ask, and I consider myself a good parent, and that my first question isn't, how is he going to make up for it? My first question is, how long is he out for, or how long? You know, that as a parent, not that my kid's getting suspended, but that's my first gut reaction. So I think you're right. We have to do some education outside of the building on some of this work too.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you made.
Yeah.
Because the schools can't be responsible for everything, right? And so bringing in some family members and community members to help or to learn about that restorative practice, I think is a really nice idea. I really like that.
Yeah, I wanted to speak to that a little bit too, because, you know, when we do these, we've done surveys or talked about doing surveys with the kids to look at their health, and a lot of the issues that the kids struggle with, that the schools struggle with because it impacts their learning, they're social, they're home issues, there's trauma at home, there's things going, and our communities now don't have support for that. They don't have those wraparound services. We can't solve all the problems. And I do think something like this and bringing the families into it, you know, unfortunately, a lot of the kids who have the most trauma are acting out the most are the ones that don't necessarily have that family surround either. But, you know, anyway, we can kind of build those supports beyond the school walls and identify responsibilities for the whole community to build those supports. I think it's really big job, not necessarily your job, but you know,
No.
just something we should all acknowledge.
Or those
that-
other people in the community, you know, like you're saying, there might the kids who are sort of experiencing the most dysregulation or trauma or acting out at school or however you want to put it, are the kids that don't maybe have that support. But who are the other people in the community? Like, is it the children's librarian? Is it, you know, I don't know. There's
Are
other
there
people,
grants the Board of Health could be getting to help with?
right? Just explaining, and
Services.
part of that might be us who are representing to other boards in the community, just talking about the changes that we're making around this at school and having it be sort of a community-wide perspective on dealing with, you know, what you're hearing across the country, an increase in behavioral issues in schools and in communities, but sort of having it be a community-wide, not saying that the teachers and the superintendent and the administrators need to do that, but I think it's a perspective that would be great if we could expand it.
Well, and it's, I mean, I would imagine too, there's some overlap in here between SPED students who have real challenges and frustrated educators who are dealing with them. I mean, I'm sure Martha is a part of this as well, but there's that component too.
Yeah.
There can be that.
There can be a
connection.
diagnosable component, right? There could be a family component. There could simply be, this is an interesting choice of words, but there could be an age-appropriate component.
Right.
Right.
Middle school
Sure.
boys traditionally act, you know, out more than, you know, they do when they're younger or older sometimes. So not that that's good behavior, but normed behavior isn't always high-quality behavior.
Right.
Right. So, yeah, it's kind of like a big stew. You put this all together, and out come behaviors. Right. And so part of the threat assessment work, right, and part of this work is to try to identify the behaviors, what the precipitating factors are, how we can repair, how we can get the child to learn, and theoretically manage their behaviors the next time around.
That's
Yeah.
tall order.
And the restorative justice hits the part where you have the middle school boy behavior, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have restorative practices instead of punitive, so that student maybe is saved from you're a bad kid.
Yeah.
The you're a bad kid syndrome in sixth grade, which carries them into high school, and they just carry this label of I'm a bad kid. And if you can maybe hit that early.
And in
or
a small
avoid that.
district, it's hard to escape that, too.
You can't, yeah.
Yeah, get labeled.
Not to build this out even further, but this is the kind of thing, punitive behavior and practice, and that being on a kid's record has kept kids who are not academic, who are really interested in vocational jobs, out of Essex Tech.
That was a conversation. That has been a
Crazy.
conversation at the staff level already.
Yeah,
So,
I
like,
mean, that
our job is not
hurts my
to
heart.
shortchange a kid early on in their developmental process of an experience. That is not our job. As a matter of fact, our job is exactly the opposite.
Yeah. And then
Wow.
one challenge, I think, is the safer kids feel, that becomes an environment they feel safe to act out.
It's fair, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think as they get older, less so, but in some cases, when a child is misbehaving, it is a sign that they feel safe in that community, in that space, so
Yep.
keep an eye for
Well, it
that too.
plays in that whole disparities things too. The restorative justice is more equity, inclusion, that whole thing. So I love it.
This actually fits perfectly with what we've been doing as well, with our discussions with community leaders within the school. This is something that's come up multiple times. And a lot of what we are looking at specifically focuses on the health aspects of these issues, specifically around substance abuse. So I think it's wonderful that Dr. Branco is also working on the exact same initiatives that we happen to be working on. So, yes. Yeah.
That's great. So donations, another really generous check for $4,000 from the Brace Cove Foundation for musical instruction. They're such a wonderful friend of the school system. That's great. And 4 Bruins tickets for 8th grade trip from Donald McCullough. I think I've got that right, McCullough?
Yes.
So I think we need a motion to accept these donations.
So
Okay.
moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimously passes. So that's really much appreciated from both sources. And now on to the elementary school gym floor update.
So June and I will tag team on this. I will say very little because I think she's got a lot of better information than I do on this particular topic. But as you know, the replacement of the elementary school gym floor was already put through to capital asset. And John Parisi has been working with vendors and contacting people about this work. Had this company, New England Sports Floors, come in, who was not the company that gave us the quote.
Correct.
The company that gave us the quote has not responded or come back at this point in time. This gentleman did and has given us an alternative, so I'm going to let June speak to the alternative a little bit.
So this is Vince at New England Sports Floors, and he met with John and Kirk Keating, Director of Buildings and Grounds, and he came up to the school and walked through the elementary gym. After looking at it, he came up with an alternative saying it really doesn't have to be replaced, in his opinion. He thought about 80 square feet near the doors after you walk in, to the exterior doors across from your entry point. There is water damage. And after looking with Kirk and talking about it, and they noticed the gutter system outside could be the cause of this. Kirk has decided that he can do the correction himself, so now we're just talking materials only on that to fix that issue. And that Vince said it would be, why not replace those sections that are severely damaged and then sand and resurface the whole floor. He feels that that floor, the way they made wood back then, the thickness of it, you can't get that quality again, and that this floor has life to sand more than once going forward. So sand it, resurface it, and then reline it. And that he was figuring it would take about only 3 weeks of time, so we could do it, start in June, right as school got out, and at a cost of about $17,000 instead of the $75,000. Now, we asked, John and Kirk also asked, well, can you replace the floor? Is this something you do? And he goes, I certainly can. However, when you remove it, what's underneath?
Right.
What's the risk? Is there something wrong with the water, the vapor barrier? Is there something wrong with the concrete? Once you do that, and then you figure that out, well, that might eat up the whole $75,000 that was appropriated by the town. Now you've fixed a problem and you have no floor. Where's that extra $7,500,000, who knows,
Right.
going to come from? So I guess I'm reaching out to you for your opinions. I know the town embraced us saying that, let's replace this floor. It has some bumps. It's dangerous. I agree. Mark and I walked down the other day, and I agree, near the doors, yes, that does need to be replaced. But are these little bumps, are they a hazard? I haven't heard of anyone, none of us, I played pickleball with a bad knee, for 5 weeks in there, and it was fine, you know? Is this something to maybe pursue this other avenue? And that, it has 10, 15 years of life before we maybe have to replace it. Or we could resand it again at minimal, and then this affords us to return a substantial dollar amount back to the town for other needs.
So we're just not comfortable clearly making that decision. It was your ask of the town in the first place.
Right.
So we just feel like we need your direction.
June, is this cost covered by the town, or would we have to absorb that? Is it an all or nothing with the 75,000?
Well, it's the gym floor, which was voted. I mean, we would, obviously, before signing any contract, confirm with Mitch, the town administrator, that was something that is doable. It isn't like we've decided to go buy
Right.
bleachers with it.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
still the floor.
Yeah.
My expectation is that 17.2 would come out of the appropriated number, and then it would be a give back the remaining number we just don't need for the floor at that point.
I mean, there is something attractive about being a good citizen within the town, because they've been very generous with us and saying, you know what, it turns out that we might be able to do this for a lot less, provided we get some stretch of use. I haven't been on the elementary floor in many a year, but it sounds like
Field trip.
appropriate people have walked it to,
I mean,
Check out,
yeah.
it does need to be sanded and resurfaced. It's,
sure.
it's been worn down a bit. The protective coating has been worn down, I would say, and
And he said-
is it perfectly smooth? Absolutely not.
Right.
But I do agree that the water damage, and if you can correct that, then that would prevent it from reoccurring.
Yeah.
And he did write and say that, the sanding will take care of most of the cupped floors.
Right.
He's never going to guarantee 100%, clearly, so I'm okay with that statement.
So we, last year, I think it was from students that came and the green team and everyone, we talked about wanting to have more environmentally appropriate practices. This is recycling.
Right.
It's recycling the type of flooring we can't replace. I think if we're confident in this company and their assessment, I feel like this is consistent with where we want to go with being less wasteful.
Do we know anything about the company, or are there recommendations from other
They are on the
schools?
state bid list.
Okay, so they're on the state bid
So
list.
this
That's
is what
good.
they do. They do school floors and other large
Yeah.
installations.
I mean, they are super local to where I live, so I suppose I could call around a little bit too. Until right now, I didn't realize they were in Lowell, so.
I agree with Colleen, and I also worry about what June mentioned, which is if we pull it up, we could spend the entire $75,000 and have no floor in the
Right.
gym at all. And I think I've been to many a basketball game in recent years on that floor, and
Seems fine.
it seems fine. The area that the kids play on, I don't think there's anything dangerous about that.
They also
and
don't have to remove the
stands.
bleachers. Is that the other thing he said? It was the way they would do it. If you replace the floor, it's a much more daunting job. In this case, I believe he said something about the way the bleachers already fold back. They would be able to do the work without actually disconnecting them. That's why the cost is
Yes,
pretty
according
low.
to Kirk, he says that you flip up the bottom
Right.
portion of the bleacher and they reach underneath and just sand as far as they can go. So is it truly all the way to the wall? No, but no one would ever be there anyway.
Or
And it's
shouldn't
not
be.
going to be worn down back there. Well, they better not. And, so that's addressed, because if you do replace the floor, now you're removing the bleachers. And storing them. Where are we putting them? Are we now renting a trailer?
Right.
Who's responsible for doing that? Do we negotiate with a vendor that's their responsibility, or is it ours? And it's another burden on Kirk and our limited maintenance custodial staff. Or we're now involving DPW and asking another ask of them when they're stretched to the limit.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting alternative.
Yeah.
And after we walked it, I kind of saw the validity of it.
Seems like.
So, but I wanted someone else's input, because, you know, you can just go and have the gut read, well, of course we're gonna do it, it's cheaper, done. Well, no, because you may have another perspective.
And the athletic director you mentioned has seen it as well,
Yes.
so it's not like
Actually, John's the one that
got the
found him.
quote, so.
And so he's all for it.
Yeah, I mean, for anyone who's ever done any small project at home, that the fear of you open up the wall and, I don't know, it's full of asbestos, or it's leaking, or it's cracked.
It's like
It's a real
remodeling
one.
the old
It's a real
1800s
one.
house. We all want to live in one until you,
Have to fix something.
and yeah.
Right,
Yes.
so, does anyone have a concern with this approach? It seems like the right people have done the review, and the contract seems to be written that it's, I mean, they've been very clear about what they don't cover and what they do, so it doesn't seem like it has the chance for expansion. It's on the state bid list. So I don't know if you need a vote on this per se.
You
It's-
can vote if you feel necessary, or I could just take a verbal that, you know.
Yeah, we can certainly, do we have a motion to support the, what would we call this, the revision of the capital asset
Yep.
request to cover the
Sure.
repair of the gym floor rather than the replacement?
Right.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous, that's great. Well, good
Thank
work
you,
to,
thank you.
to John, to you, to everyone who inspected it. And that would bring us to our year-end update.
No.
So June's done some work. It's a little later than normal, and she'll speak to the process, I think. And then there's 2 documents in your drive that June has put together for tonight.
So I had done the traditional fund flow that's been in existence before I even was at the school district, probably 25, 30 years of this form, which is interesting with what Mark was saying about the going into the severe deep dive of individual line items. And it was just ironic, I just did this on my own. I also included a summary sheet in a different format that we may want to pursue as a better tool, but I included both in the drive. So for the ones that are more enjoyed the traditional deep dive of the fund flow versus the summary by cost center. Our cost centers, we're not Worcester, so we do not have, and I'm thinking that their cost centers are buildings. Our cost centers are departments based on DESI codes. So, for example, your encumbered bills from the previous year, food service, admin, instructional, which would be your elementary, middle, and high, our special ed, student services, professional development, athletics, operations, transportation, health services, and retirement benefits. So after doing that, with the year end, we put it all in, and the school spent $16,220,000. It was paid for by several sources. The town budget and the generous donation of contribution of a sped reserve influx. The town taxpayers paid $13,439,000. School choice revolving contributed $1.27 million. Circuit breaker contributed $613,000. For those that don't fully understand circuit breaker, that's a contribution by the state to reimburse us for some of our tuition costs for our outer district children. And they've also added a small piece of transportation as well. So we were able to utilize that. And then our grants. We had a lot of grants this year because of our ESSER funding from the federal government during COVID. I've listed salaries only, and that is because grant expenses, you cannot replace what you would have purchased in the budget. So those are separate purchases. And usually with salaries as well. So for example, in our ESSER salaries for our interventionists that we brought in last year and that we still have some on staff this year, they're grant funded. When the grant goes away, those positions go away. So, but they are being spent. So that's why they are included in this analysis. So we did, with our grant money, we were able to fund a food service staff member, several interventionists and a reading specialist at the elementary, middle, and high, several positions in the special ed, and that is a annual contribution that changes every year, but it's called the 240 grant, which is IDEA and SPED Early Childhood that we receive for special ed. With our ESSER grant, we were allowed to bring in an extra maintenance custodial staff member last year to help out with all the additional cleaning and disinfecting. And we were able, luckily now that person is permanently on staff at no additional expense to the taxpayers. It was, we had in a retirement, so that person was able to continue on. But the first year, it cost us nothing to have that extra person. And also, we were able last year to bring in an additional nurse to handle all the health issues surrounded, due to COVID. And that was the full funding of the 16.2 million, and the balance is in your drive on school choice and circuit breaker. The target that Rob Lebo had set, that he had hoped would be there, is there. So we did reach our goals. The new format, any comments on the new format, whether you like this summary? I was trying to maybe move in a more, I heard Mark last meeting saying that the fund flow was cumbersome and maybe a little too complex. It's not for understanding, but no.
I don't remember using the word cumbersome. It was more,
I feel it's cumbersome.
It was
How's
more-
that? It's me. I'm putting my feelings on you.
my brain was being cumbersome. I couldn't quite,
Fair.
I couldn't wrap my head around it.
Right.
That was what it was.
And
Yeah,
so
it was
I
not.
came up with the more simplified that maybe does someone really want to know about the librarian cost, or are you really hoping to have more of a picture of instructional costs and how we're doing?
So I think both are valuable.
Okay.
But I think the summary kind of heads in the direction that I was speaking to, where updates to us start to flow into what we're presenting to FinCom and to Board of Selectmen at the end of the year. And it's a consistent message for the public. Like, this is very simple to understand in terms of inflows, outflows, encumbrances, and then where are we by the end of the year. The one I just wanted to clarify, because I think you said this, in your paid by column in the simplified format where it says town budget, I think what you said was this was both the budgeted amount plus the SPED withdrawal? SPED,
But it was also a town contribution from the SPED Reserve Fund.
that's what
It's
I'm asking.
transferred into the general ledger. So
Right.
it isn't a separate account. So when you vote at town meeting, it isn't like school choice or student activities. It isn't a revolving fund. It
Yeah.
goes right into the budget. Now, it isn't a part of your base budget for this season coming up.
Right.
It's an in-out. But that's where they put it.
So maybe we can even parentheses that if you.
That's where I was
right.
going.
Well,
If-
certainly.
If you just had that
Includes
broken
appropriated
out.
budget and blank.
Right.
That would preempt someone saying, but that wasn't what
Right.
we approved.
Right.
It's
Exactly.
like, you're
You certainly
right.
can add that.
Okay.
But looking for, I think this is a huge help to just wrapping your head around it initially, because it's very clear where we stand as the curtain rises on the next school year.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys feel the same, or, I mean, it's a work in progress, but I think I do think both documents are great, because if you really want to drill down into the detail, and I appreciate there are only two colors on that larger Excel sheet,
all
yellow
I
and
can see.
green.
Isn't that rainbow?
I'm colorblind. Yeah,
I think-
this is all I'm seeing.
Yep.
Well, I
You
always
see different fonts going forward.
Right, mine are all
The
fonts.
colors are gone, fonts are in.
Oh, it's okay.
They're more inclusive.
Yep.
Well, I always worry about showing my ignorance, so I'm just going to dive in with dumb questions. Because when I look at a budget like home or business or something like that, how did we do? And so that's the more in-depth one, right? The other one that isn't the summary shows us how did we do against expected, and I like that too, because this tells me the actual numbers. But I really like having the drill down, because I'm like, well, where were we way off? And for a lot of those, like, things that we were way off on, we were expected those. You know, we knew it was going to be like really red here, but really black here, and it balances out. So
So I think as we have new leadership building the budget process now, the chair and I have talked about my style being done through a budget book as opposed to just the Excel spreadsheets. So with a budget book, there'll be a narrative piece, there'll be the spreadsheet component, and then there'll be the overview. And I think you will see that in a budget build. You'll be able to see the expecteds and then the actuals, and then the expecteds and the actuals over time. I would suspect, I don't want to speak for June, but if you wanted that in real time at the quarterlies, maybe there's a tweak that could be done with that. Right.
It's kind of, right.
Right?
Well, I think part of maybe, Kathy, what you're saying is that this is kind of a long way towards, this is the Q1 budget. So as the gun goes off, you've got this much money in the kitty. It doesn't yet tell us, because we just talked about it tonight. But be aware, by Q2, you know, the following things are either coming in or going out. So don't get too excited about this big number, because it's going to be moving. And then Q3 might have its own assumptions about.
Correct.
Well, and also in the first quarter, when I did even the old, the traditional fund flow, I have to be the most negative person around and say, we are going to spend this. We're going to overspend here. We're going to overspend. And you look and say, for example, you expected to see 500,000 at the end of the year. Well, when I'm that negative, I'm coming back to you and saying, well, we're only going to have 150, because that's worst case. And there are those occasions over the past 20-something years that has happened. And to me, I'd rather, I hate the negativity of it, but on the other hand, you don't want to be blindsided by it. And then all of a sudden, because you weren't prepared, now you haven't been able to do even a thoughtful budget. I think also it's difficult doing a budget this time of year for next year when we're just closing out last year and we haven't really known where we're going this year.
Yeah.
It's a strange thing that I think is very unique to the public side. The private side, it's hard to understand that, because that's not the way it works.
Right. And this was totally the conversation in that budgeting workshop I went to, where it's like, as long as you have the assumptions stuck in there, like this is extremely conservative, this is not representative of certain funds coming in and out, it manages the expectations of not only the school committee, but I think we don't need to be managed so much as just as informed, but it allows you to answer the questions of the public who may see this and say, hey, you're sitting on a boatload of money, because we've heard that for a decade, and then that boat sails. And of course, the opposite of that is, would you prefer that we drain the bank account every year and have to come back to you every year to resolve this? So I think this is getting closer to what is helpful and allows for a narrative in the budget book to say, because there'll always be questions about, I think it was a year or two ago, where we suddenly had much less of an expense in one category that really had to do with some high needs issues not being in the district anymore. So that, that was something where, why did that happen? Well, there's obviously a concrete reason for that, and you don't want to be too specific because you don't want to identify people in a small district, but having that contained in some sort of assumptions where you will see the following, categories altering dramatically because of X. So I don't know. I think it's getting closer, but definitely it's probably something that we'll workshop going forward, going into the budget books to.
I think it ties into the next topic, which is the budget. And as Mark said, he has a different style than each superintendent, and each school committee has a different style on how they present their budget. And please correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're more of a narrative person. And that's what you would like to see in a book, in a budget book, where maybe you do have the generalization with the narrative. But in the back, we can have an appendix with the old
Yeah, we have to
style.
have it.
Absolutely.
Not as
Absolutely.
many colors, but the old
Yeah,
style.
absolutely,
Where
yeah.
you have the deep dive, because some people need that deep dive to wrap their head around it, and some, it just shuts, I guess it's being inclusive. Some people can't wrap their head around that, and they would shut down where they would like to see something general. All right, the middle school is this, the high school is this, operations is this. They don't need to know that textbooks went up by $500 and this one went up by $3. Some people revel in it. But if that's an appendix in the back of a budget book,
Yeah.
Yep.
I think in the end, we may be reaching more people than we did before.
That'd be a better communication
Even
tool.
though the deep dive and the way it's been presented before was fabulous in the detail level, but I think it's not inclusive for people who don't learn that way or think of math in
Overwhelmed.
that way.
Yeah.
So maybe this is a way to give everyone what style works for them in one nice book.
Well, and in the alternative universe outside of education, typically what you see in budget presentations is it is assumed that the chief financial officer or the CEO has, not the CEO in this case, has, no, I don't mean you, I mean in those sort of presentations, the board assumes that the CEO and the CFO has sweat the details, and now
Right.
they're looking for the 50,000-foot view overview, but there's always in the back an appendix, so that if someone wants to dive in and say, what about this tiny item? And that's where you'll get a starring role at the FinCom meeting. There's an ability to respond to it, but I think for a while, we really needed to show that detail as the leadoff item because there was a perception that somehow we weren't being fully transparent. So we transparented people to death in these meetings, and I think they are now going to like the high-end overview, but the supportive detail that they can reference at their leisure.
I mean, it took us so long to write that plain language budget booklet, trying to translate that into
Something accessible.
something that where everyone could figure out which came out of which fund and which we were going to get back, and it was
So I'm drafting now,
Yeah.
and I looked at the work that you all had done in 2020.
that was more of a communication tool too for an override.
But it was a great tool,
Yeah.
really good tool. And then there are many districts that I'm sort of learning from as exemplars. So I'm in the middle of building a template now. The chair and I will look at the template, we'll make some tweaks before we really kind of unveil anything.
For feedback.
For feedback,
I just
yes,
have a
yes.
detailed spreadsheet that I loved, which is that we didn't budget for the success of the teams. And so one of the places where we're in the red is because they needed extra officials and buses and travel, transportation, because we had so many winning teams last year. So just a really nice detail you don't get in that summary sheet.
Right.
So I do like to have something to dive into.
So another thing that I think might be nice in that budget book is some way, if it's possible, it might not be possible because it might not be, you might not be able to do it, is sort of like a how to read it
Yeah, we'll do that.
in a way,
Yep.
if you can break it down to a very
Yep.
easy
Yep.
to read format. So
Yep.
just as an example, so you could probably answer this super easy, but I'm struggling with this. So in the summary, which is really great to just see it all on one page like that, like I love it. So that summary is for year end, right? And then the fund flow is also
You're right.
at the end of June. But some of the numbers, I guess one of the things that I'm struggling with is on the summary, you have it by the codes, you have those cost centers by code. But those don't correlate exactly to the fund flow. And so that's why I'm trying to see the big picture, and then I'm trying to dive deeper to look for the details, but I don't know where on the fund flow to find those details because the two things don't correlate exactly.
No, they don't, because the fund flow, I inherited this. And to be honest, the state codes they've changed 3 times since, the way they want things. So they were just doing it for what that school committee wanted years ago. So actually, for fund flow, I take the general ledger and I'm pulling this number from here and that number from here and that one and plugging it into that one line item. And then I'm going over here and over here and over here. So there really is no correlation. I can change instead of, I mean, I don't know if someone was, for example, do you really want to know the deep dive of whether the guidance counselor line is going over and the librarian is under, or are you more interested in the elementary salaries are over or under, special ed, regular ed, as a bundle? And so I could change a fund flow to reflect that, which would then, with just a few lines, would tie in to, I would have elementary teachers, middle teachers, high school teachers, and then I could, on this one, you would see 976, the total. So now it really, it's just three numbers brings to the summary. It's maybe simplifying this, but still
Yeah.
leaving enough detail that then all of a sudden this would make more sense.
So maybe you,
We're gonna have to play with it.
That's what
This
I was just
I mean,
gonna
I
say.
kind of
Very
like.
interesting. I think I'm gonna have to do 4 different ones.
I know that's.
I just
mean,
think what's important
yeah.
for the committee to hear is something that June said quickly that I don't want to be missed.
Yeah.
This is not the budget. Like
Right,
June
right,
goes into the general
Yeah.
ledger,
Right.
so there is work being done.
Yeah.
Manual work being done to create that and then create the secondary document.
Right.
So I think. Right. So thank you for saying it that way. So I think I just want to recognize that that's time being occupied, and so we will do whatever work you need us to do, and
Yeah.
we'll spend whatever amount of time you would request us to do it. But at some point, I think it needs to be streamlined to the best of our ability, so that June can continue
Totally.
to do all the other stuff.
I agree with that. 100%. I'm not trying to make
No, I get
more
that.
work.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to wrap my, like, that 976 cost center. So I'm trying to see, I do like the idea of seeing elementary, middle school, high school, where those each are. But I guess then your question, do you really need to go deeper into that and know, is it librarian guidance, what department?
And this is where the
So-
operational piece that
right.
the chair talked about earlier, right? Where you can get in the weeds, and that's where
Right.
you just went to this session talking about that.
Right.
So how far in the weeds is the committee
But
going
I
to get
guess
on
what
this?
I'd like to be able to see is on the summary, say, okay, that's cost center 976.
Yes.
Where can I find that in whatever level deeper we're going? Where can I find that? I guess.
I think we used to
I'm
get
not
cost
worried.
center tabs in Rob's
Yeah.
crazy budget. Weren't there cost center tabs, like we could look at elementary school and?
Oh, yes, and that would still be in this,
In the
in this
back of the
budget
book.
book. That would be the
Back of the book.
appendix. So
It'd all be there.
fund flow is just an informative snapshot where a
Yeah,
budget
maybe it's my
sheet-
trying to compare the two when
Right, I
I
think
should
you're
be
talking about the
comparing those
budget.
two. Maybe that's my hang up on
And
that.
what
yeah.
I'm struggling with is the fund flow is brand new to me.
Yeah.
Every other district has just had the budget, and then they've created kind of the cheat sheet guides.
Yeah.
So that fund flow, I'm not for or against it, quite honestly. It's new, and it's another piece of work, and it's another piece of representing the numbers.
And is there a better way to pull numbers so that you're not like, that must be crazy? Like, you're trying to come up with one piece
Yeah.
of number, you gotta pull 3 things.
So
you
I-
gotta remember.
Right, and then the payroll person, Allison, and Amanda had the joy of doing that, of doing an encumbrance of every person's payroll, and then putting them together and drawing down off of it, so I had the encumbrance list, because obviously a general ledger, the town doesn't have what we expect to be charged against it, they just have the reality of what has been. Yeah, so that then,
So it might
put-
be-
it does put a lot of people in play. This one little report does take days.
So, Mr. Chair, it might be reasonable to let June play with that fund flow a little bit and create create some kind of condensed version that maybe correlates, and then kick it back for a little bit of review and see if it meets the needs.
Because I think what came out of this session, because they were equally concerned with getting clarity for the school committee, but also not letting them go beyond their charters so deep into the weeds that they confuse themselves, frankly. It feels like what we're looking for is, here's what's budgeted, here's what's expended, here's what's to come, but then here's the year over year. So that would allow you to say, hey, I noticed in the elementary school category, it's 50% lower, or 50% higher. Why is that, June? And then the details you have, because you have to track them anyway, but it seems like it's a question of granularity. So that's something we can play with, where our oversight maybe doesn't need to go down into the monthly back and forth of so much as it is what's the oversight. Like, one question I had from this is, which will naturally occur, when we see how many grants were the way we paid for things, there's a lot there. There's like 800,000. And so a natural question of anyone seeing this would be, and when the grants end,
Right.
do those people vanish? Do we suddenly have 800,000 that we need to come up with? That's a question that a school
Right.
committee would want to ask, because, you know, we would say, well, how can we do that on this category?
And that'll be the beauty of the budget book, right?
Right.
So that's where
Right.
that we will collaboratively write a narrative that tells the story about the numbers, because you can't, otherwise the simple form isn't a simple form anymore. So you put the simple form
Right.
in the budget book, there's a nice little paragraph or two that tells that story, and someone gets to read, oh, we are going to be okay. This grant is here for 2 more years. Well, we're not, and the district knows that these positions are going away and is planned for that. Or
Right.
the district now has to absorb that money. I think that will all be articulated pretty
The
clearly.
reason I picked on that one was at our last presentation to FinCom during the height of COVID. One of the questions was, that's great that the state is providing and the feds are providing all these funds to augment and to catch up, but they were very afraid that you know,
Yeah.
that meant that it was a forever additional expense. So it's reasonable